many years with the SNP, now with Alex Salmond's Alba Party. Here's the point. When we had Brexit, we had, Conservatives and UKIPers and Labour and the odd Green and the odd Liberal. And there was a coalition around the idea we should leave the European Union. I appeared on a stage with George Galloway. I mean, nobody would ever believe that. What is interesting about the campaign for separation/independence in Scotland is that it became the SNP and only the SNP that was identified with that issue. Your old party, it's got further to go down, in my view. Do you see the logic of the argument that with it goes that campaign that you fought for so many years?
I understand the hope in our opponents that that's what happened, but that is, fortunately, not going to be the case. Now, it will be difficult for many people. The ongoing and escalating challenges that those of us who are following this will be aware that there is yet more to come, and none of it is good.
Yes, I mean,
the fundamental issue, the point that you made, is absolutely where the independence movement was at the end of the referendum, and that movement rose up in one of the darkest times imaginable after a defeat, so close but yet so far. And we galvanised and rallied behind the SNP as the vehicle for independence.
Yes, I mean Labour voters who favoured that policy came behind the SNP.
And the problem was that during the campaign we had Labour for Independence, we had Green Party for Independence, Pensioners for Independence, Lib Dems for Independence, so there was that broad church, and the SNP always has historically been a very broad church. It's been one of its great strengths.
But the SNP, Neil, after that referendum in 14, 9 years ago, getting a long time ago.
Yes, indeed.
After that referendum, effectively what happened was those groups all became the SNP. And for the last few years, and I'll come to Alba in a second, but for the last few years, if you believe in Scottish separation, you are an SNPer. If your party, your vehicle, wants to use that separation to pass trans legislation that 80% of Scots don't agree with, 80% of Scots, despite whatever the Parliament did, can you see how the thing that you've believed in for so many years is in big trouble?
Well, they need to be decoupled, and they will be decoupled. And I think that as things are clarified in the coming weeks and months, I think there will probably be that spirit of galvanised desire for independence will move away from the SNP and back to the movement. We'll see that at the beginning of May when we have a march in Glasgow organised by All Under One Banner, which is exactly that broad church that you were speaking of. But what I would say is that the decision for the SNP to be the single standard bearer was a deliberate decision, and it was a decision that was taken by Nicola Sturgeon. And I think what we've learned from that is that no one and no party is the independence movement. And so it's perhaps a very painful lesson, but it's an important lesson to the movement that we cannot allow that to happen again. We must ensure that that broad church is reflected in the leadership of the movement. And that will happen, Nigel. The desire for the support for the independence is plummeting, or for the SNP is plummeting.
As is support.
But support for independence.
Well, Alex Salmond himself, your leader himself, hang on, your leader himself in a speech the other day talked about the fall in support, the damage the SNP were doing there. But let's get on to Alex Salmond.
Not for independence, Nigel. I have to
big dominant character.
Yeah.
Salmond, actually got a personality too, most unusual in politics. And he's been in a few problems and a few scrapes, and through a tough time. How is it that he's not been able to get Alba off the ground in the way that he'd hoped?
Well, I think we were stymied, unfortunately, by a decision that Nicola Sturgeon took in the 21 general election in Scotland, which was to give your second vote to the SNP, which effectively would be a wasted vote when they were performing so strongly in the constituency votes. And what that inevitably favoured was the unionist parties coming in on the list, which is, the makeup of the current Scottish Parliament. Now, there's very little value in me speculating on her reasons for that. But just from the perspective as an independent supporter, it was a really foolish move, because we would have had an absolutely galvanised, independence-focused Scottish Parliament, and that would only have strengthened the voice of the movement, not just nationally but also internationally. And I think so. I think the influence of personality. Personality is important, but when one person's wishes dictate what happens in a movement,
do you know what?
It's not a good thing.
It happens all through history.
Oh, it does, and it's never good. And it's never good.
Final thought. You've got incredible devolved powers. You know, Scotland is self-governing in a very wide range of areas. But let's be honest, there's not going to be a second referendum on Scottish separation for a long time now, is there?
Well, I'm unlike many other people. I am not completely wed to the idea that a referendum is the only democratic vehicle by which you can establish a desire for self-governance. You know, there are other ways and means to bring the focus on the wishes of the population, and that is, in essence, the most important thing. That there's a democratic process, whatever that may be.
Well, there's a deeper agenda here. And we're going to drill it. Sounds quite sinister to me. We're going to drill into it one day. But Neale,
very liberating.
Hanvey, thank you very much indeed.